it too hard. She left me here with this guitar. You could try stealing my heart, it's already gone. You could tell something is wrong, just leave me alone. I don't even know where to start.
Yo, it is your boy Brad King Productions, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be watching 10 scary moments that happened in horror movies, so let's get straight to it. 10.
Is there anything better than a surprisingly effective sequence buried in an otherwise run-of-the-mill or even outright atrocious flick? Yes, there is, and it's a series of effective sequences combined in order to create an actually good whole film. But we all know good horror movies exist, and lists of those rare gems are a dime a dozen. Even lists of surprisingly good horror remakes or unsung horror comedy gems are 10 a penny, even if none of those reach the lofty heights of those offered here at What Culture. So what we're here for today is a rarer beast, that being a brilliantly terrifying scene which is somehow snuck into an otherwise awful horror film. Heaven knows why these sequences see the light of day, since the directors and producers of these films seem incapable of staging a solid scene if their lives depended on it. But nonetheless, all of these 2-star or below films managed to feature 5-star set pieces which stood head and shoulders above the surrounding crud, and elevated otherwise laughably bad flicks into just about watchable territory. Call it Ghost Ship Syndrome, if you like, named after the crap film's stellar opening, which we refuse to include on this list since everyone's heard about it by now. Here are 10 cases of terrible horror movies which somehow featured incredibly scary scenes. I am Kirsten from What Culture Horror, and these are 10 terrifying moments in terrible horror movies. Number 10, Bye Bye Bisected Lawyer, 13 Ghosts. This instance of Ghost Ship Syndrome actually comes from, appropriately enough, the director of Ghost Ship, whose insistence that CGI ghosts are going to be huge, trust me, saw them garner some incredible cast for some awful films in the early 2000s. Yes, Ghost Ship may have boasted the usual suspect himself, Gabriel Byrne, but only this 2001 effort can claim to have brought together TV's Monk Tony Shalhoub and Scream's Matthew Lillard at last for some ghost busting. Unfortunately, said ghost busting occurs in an overdeveloped mansion filled with uninteresting characters following an unoriginal plot in a film whose editors appear to bear a grudge against the epilepsy sufferers of the world. But beneath all the headache-inducing quick cuts, there's a moment well worth watching when a sleazy lawyer is brutally bisected by the titular spooks. Yes, you may need the aid of a pause button to see these ghosts clearly, but the design of these baddies is undeniably original, i.e. utterly terrifying, even for the hardened horror fiends, and this one kill wherein a pair of doors split the attorney in two where he stands is unforgettably gruesome and inventive. Shame the surrounding film is more notable for its insufferable editing than anything else. Number 9, Au revoir Paris, House of Wax. By the time 2005's utterly unnecessary House of Wax remake hit theatres, it was already infamous solely for the decision to cast simple life reality TV star / millionaire heiress Paris Hilton as one of its interchangeable teen victims. A sanitised slasher which lacked inventive kills or any of the original flick's clever satirical wit, this forgettable dud was largely written off as a useless save for its stunt casting, which is actually more true than its detractors gave it credit for. Yes, the film is largely unwatchable, and yes, the heiress is only in it for the mutually beneficial your film gets bad publicity for having a famously awful actor, I get bad publicity for being bad at acting, and we all end up more famous gambit. But the death scene which the flick puts poor Paris through is genuinely unexpectedly tense and terrifying, with its creepy cat and mouse calling to mind Alexandre Aja's then recent new French extremity landmark, Switchblade Romance. The chase is one thing, but the unfortunate character's gruesome demise, which sees her impaled through the skull before being skewered, is insanely gory for this otherwise unremarkable flick's standards, and elevates the pedestrian slasher to being worth a watch for this scene alone. Number 8, the subway scene, Bless the Child. Bless the Child is uniquely dreadful. It's a statement with which almost no one seems to disagree. Between the film's humdrum reception by audiences upon its release in 2001, the drubbing it received from critics, and most notably the fact that it has been completely forgotten in the years which followed. Yes, the flick's twisty mystery may have a few choice satirical barbs to throw at the Church of Scientology, but any wit or incisive ideas are drowned out by the bland religious iconography and boring demonic business which plagued early 2000s 2000s horror from Heath Ledger's The Sin Eater to the almost unwatchable, laughable double bill of End of Days and Stigmata. And yet one scene which sees Kim Basinger's heroic protagonist save the titular Chosen One from the grasps of a cult by hopping into a crowded subway car manages to feature a scare so effective the viewer might momentarily remember they're watching a film from the Blob / Nightmare on Elm Street 3 helmer Chuck Russell. One of the cult members watches as the window before momentarily flashing a horrifying demonic visage only Basinger catches in a rare moment where early CGI and horror meet to terrifying, rather than unintentionally hilarious effect. Number 7. The opening sequence, My Soul to Take. My Soul to Take is a rare misfire from Scream helmer and all-round horror legend Wes Craven. And yes, we're aware Scream 3 is also on this list. But the man gave us Last House on the Left, The Hills Have Eyes and Freddy Krueger, so he can have 2 free passes. Particularly when both bad flicks feature a pair of killer sequences as seen in this 2010 fantasy horror's incredible opening. YouTuber Ryan Hollinger has offered an in-depth look on where this one went wrong, a typical case on more ambition than oversight apparently. But you'd never know the film was destined to fail from this tight, tense opening which establishes the backstory of its villain with the same brutal efficiency Craven was infamous for since Scream's iconic beginning. Watched as a standalone short, this scene is an extraordinary marriage of bare bones plot, quick character establishing and rising tension. If only the rest of the flick didn't unravel faster than the innards of one of Ghostface's victims. Number 6. The Gas Leak, Scream 3. Scream 3 is a failure from the needless douchebagification of former anti-hero Cotton Weary in its overlong opening sequence straight through to its god-awful ending, which manages to undo the effective closer of the original film by retconning in the involvement of this film's simpering villain in what must be one of slasher cinema's most overwrought coincidences. And what an achievement that is, given the subgenre's predilection for corny twists. And yet, yes, alright, we don't want to give this Ehren Kruger scripted effort any unnecessary praise, and it remains one of the late great horror icon Wes Craven's few true misfires. But midway through the interminably slow and needlessly convoluted plot of this overlong mess, a crowd of characters are assembled in a rented cottage outside of LA, huddled together en masse to avoid an attack from the masked murderer. Patrick Warburton's mildly effective comic relief has just been offed, and only one of the ensemble remains inside the abode, reading reams of script as the killer sends them via fax. 2000s. That's when he flicks a lighter once the lights go out in order to make out the script pages, and proceeds to blow up the entire house with him inside, in a shockingly large-scale moment of action horror which manages the difficult feat of combining the two genres gracefully. Number 5. The Hitchhiker's Death, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003. Remember when Transformers franchise mastermind / bane of critics everywhere, Michael Bay, decided that he needed to remake every classic horror with his own individual style stamped all over these cheap knockoffs? No? Then we'd love to ingest some of whatever you're taking to forget this embarrassing era for horror fans. The Platinum Dunes decade has largely been deservedly written out of celluloid history, since most everyone who wants to watch Friday the 13th or A Nightmare on Elm Street nowadays will reach for the flawed but enjoyable originals over the soulless noughties retreads. But circa 2003, Bay was a big enough name to justify a remake of one of horror's most beloved properties, stripping Tobe Hooper's unforgettably grimy, intense original of all of its vicious impact by applying a squeaky clean MTV sheen to proceedings. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake is an entirely regrettable, wrong-headed endeavour. Well, actually not entirely. This banger sequence early on wherein an unfortunate hitchhiker's brains are blown out, prompting the camera to, in a shot which remains impressive for its virtuoso daring, glides through her open head, prompting a rare gasp of awe and horror from the audience amidst all the groans and boredom before and after this sole moment. Number 4. That Ending, Final Destination 5. Did anyone really believe there was a grand overarching master plan for the enjoyably gory but largely scare-free Final Destination series? Yes, the first 2 films featured a pair of incredible opening sequences, both of which utilised a combination of CGI and crunchy practical gore effects to create terrifyingly claustrophobic and believable catastrophes. But the remainder of the films were devoted to increasingly cartoony and over-the-top death sequences, which owed as much to Chuck Jones as Chuck Russell, and outside of occasional cameos from horror icon slash Candyman himself, Tony Todd, none of them could claim to be very scary or even interconnected. That is until Final Destination 5, which we maintain should have taken the Scream 4 route and been titled Final Destination, which is a largely routine outing for the franchise, a little less scary and more humdrum than its immediate predecessors, until its ending. The bombshell twist reveals that the film is actually a prequel, as it ends with the ill-fated flight which opened the first film, a gory and scary full-circle reveal which leaves the entire series seeming far smarter and scarier in retrospect, whether or not this is actually earned. Number 3, The Opening, Friday the 13th, 2009. What was that about Platinum Dunes, you asked? Are we done discussing overpaid music video producer Michael Bay's ill-fated foray into remaking classic horrors of earlier eras? Of course not. It may be a decade since the last cinematic outing, but we're still a bit bitter about what Bay's production company did to the legacy of our boy Jason Voorhees, so hear us out here. From casting the worst Gilmore Girls boyfriend as its lead, through to wasting Disturbia's Aaron Yu in a thankless supporting role, the 2009 redo of Friday the 13th has little going for it beyond being a great way to annoy fans of the franchise by reminding them that this scare-free dud exists. Except the film's 2 opening sequences. What a good sign when a film starts twice. They're actually rather stellar distillations of what makes the series so solid, eschewing any attempts at building tension or anything resembling character development in favour of quickly recapping Mrs. Voorhees' gory end before introducing some unlikable teens, and immediately brutally offing them all. It's a bracing shock which gives us better Jason action than anything in the film that follows, and is worth watching as a short film version of the original. Just turn it off after the first 20 minutes. Number 2, The Kids Learn the Truth. Well, the first truth. A Nightmare on Elm Street. There's almost nothing good about the A Nightmare on Elm Street remake. But wait, didn't we just insist that was true about the Friday the 13th and Texas Chainsaw Massacre remakes alike, only to manage to find an ameliorating sequence in each? Well, yeah, but at least those are entire sequences. The best moment from this revisited Freddy Krueger origin story is a momentary but nonetheless nearly transformative scene between Rooney Mara's disturbed protagonist and her love interest as the pair uncover the horrific truth of how their parents formed a lynch mob and murdered Freddy vigilante style in a moment of violent street justice. The scene plays out in a shadowy Freddy's murder and leading the audience to wonder whether this vicious retribution may have been misplaced. What if he was innocent? What if this was a moment of mass hysteria in the era of the McMartin preschool trials and satanic panic? Good God, what if Freddy Krueger actually did nothing wrong? It's a distinctly chilling possibility which serves to elevate this flick from a standard slasher to a more ambiguous Candyman-esque exploration of how evil is created by an unsparing society rather than born into being. Then, a half hour of subpar slashing later, the film promptly ruins this moral ambiguity by clarifying in grossly exploitative terms that, nope, he's a sadistic child molester. Thank God. For a second there it seemed as if Platinum Dunes had gone somewhere clever and original. God forbid. Number 1, the death Chris always deserved. Carrie, 2013. It's a shame given how superb star Chloe Grace Moretz's central performance is and how effectively director Kimberly Peirce handled an atmosphere of tension and mounting unease in 1999's tragic Boys Don't Cry, that this remake bombs so badly. Taking on Brian De Palma's effective and infamously over-the-top 1976 original, adapted from Stephen King's blockbuster debut novel, was always going to prove challenging, but stripping back the nudity and problematic content of the original for a more sanitised view of high school life proves lethal to this flick's chances of success, not to mention casting the charisma-free Ansel Elgort as the romantic lead. However, one thing left untouched is central villain Chris's evil, and the enjoyably hammy turn from her actor, along with Judy Greer's likeable, well-meaning gym teacher, does manage to elevate the strangely flat and tension-free attempted horror. However, it's her extremely gruesome, drawn-out death scene which we're giving the top spot here, as it's the viciously visceral fate that the awful Chris has always deserved since the original novel, not to mention the first film, and the sequence surprisingly manages to leave even the master of overkill De Palma's original version of the demise in the dust. And there we go, 10 of the most terrifying moments in really bad horror movies. But
that's gonna be it for that video. All y'all have a blessed day. It's Brave King Productions.